Ancient Greece civilization developed around the coastland of the Mediterranean Sea. Four distinct groups of peoples immigrated into Greece, settling in different regions around the coastland of the sea. A region or country of city-states in southeastern Europe between Italy and Asia Minor, on the west by the Adriatic Sea and Ionian Sea, and on the north by Mount Olympus and adjacent mountains. In the early years of its history, Greece was a country of self-governing city-states. Politically and militarily, the Greek city-states were weak. Their varied backgrounds led to frictions and rivalries that kept them from becoming one unified nation. The people had a common language, but they remained separated. The people established self-governing city-states opposed to establishing a nation of unity. They were unable to establish a unified nation because of their continued wars internally, rivalries, and conflicts among one another for superiority, and this made the Greek city-states politically and militarily weak, vulnerable, and destined to be ruled by other nations. In 338 BC, the southern peninsula of Greece was conquered by Philip II, king of Macedon. Philip's son and successor, Alexander the Great, 336 to 323 BC, became king over Macedonia at the age of 20 years old. Under his reign, Greece became a mighty empire with territory extending from Greece through Asia Minor to Egypt and the borders of India. Sadly, Alexander the Great lived a very short life, for he died at the age of 33, but during that short life of military conquests accomplishments, he also accomplished and established centers for Greek learning. He had a desire to spread Greek culture throughout most of the Mediterranean world from his many ideas that were based on the teachings of Plato. Therefore, his Greek ideas advanced throughout the ancient world, and he carried his Greek ideas and customs eastward as far as India, opening a way for Near Eastern ideas and customs to enter the Western world. This period of adopting Greek ideas, which were forced upon the Greek culture, was known as the Hellenistic Age, in 323 BC from the conquest of Alexander the Great and lasting until the beginning of the Christian era. After the death of Alexander, the empire was divided among his generals, and they continued to force the Greek culture upon the people of the empire. Advancement in learning, art, science, architecture, philosophy, entertainment, and government became highly developed at this time, and the Greek culture was so ingrained with these ideas that other nations were highly affected by them. Eventually the Greek language became the dominant language of the then known world. The Greek Empire endured in Eastern Europe, Egypt, and the Middle East under Alexander the Great. It continued with the division of the empire among his generals, and the final era drastically influenced the following medieval era. Scriptures tell us that from the sons of Javan, the Old Testament name for Greece, were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. These coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. The four groups of people later became known as the mixed people, namely the Achaeans, Ionians, Aetolians, and the Dorians. The Old Testament ancient name for Greece is Javan. Javan was the fourth son of Japheth, and Noah's grandson. He was the father of the Ionians, or Greeks. In the scriptures, prophecies concerning Greece were revealed to the prophets Daniel, Ezekiel, Joel, and Zechariah. In Ezekiel 27 verse 13, speak of a great many new markets were opened when trade expanded after the conquest and colonization of Southwest Asia. Greek and Arab merchants imported spices, jewels, ivory, perfume, etc. from India, in return for wine, weapons, and slaves. Slavery was common to the Greek people, having tens of thousands slaves to themselves, and their gods had slaves. Javan, Greece, Tubal, and Meshech were your traders. They bartered human lives and vessels of bronze for your merchandise. Tubal and Meshech was a people who lived in the eastern Asia Minor, now modern-day Turkey. In Daniel and Ezekiel, Greece is named. Joel speaks of the Greeks scattering the Lord's people among the nations and dividing the land the Lord gave to Israel. He speaks. They, the Greeks, have scattered the Lord's people among the nations, they have also divided his land. Joel speaks of the people of Judah and Jerusalem being removed from their land and sold to the Greeks. The people of Judah and the people of Jerusalem you have sold to the Greeks, that you may remove them far from their borders. Joel speaks of how the Lord will take his people out of those lands and where they had been sold, and return the nation's retaliation upon their own heads. Behold, I will raise them out of the place to which you have sold them, and will return your retaliation upon your own head. In Zechariah 9 verses 11 through 13, a prophecy was also prophesied. As for you also, because of the blood of your covenant, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to the stronghold, you prisoners of hope. Even today, I declare that I will restore double to you. For I have bent Judah, my bow, fitted the bow with Ephraim, and raised up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and made you like the sword of a mighty man. This prophecy was fulfilled during the conquests of the Maccabees against the Greco-Syrian Empire. In the prophecies of Daniel, scriptures tell us that Greece was the third empire of bronze, in our history conquered by Alexander the Great. Chapter 8 in Daniel explains the ram and goat as the kings of Media, Persia, and Greece, the Medo-Persian and Greek empires. The vision is showing Daniel how the next two Gentile empires will come upon the world scene. The vision is a rehearsal of the ram, being Cyrus, and his successors conquering the westward lands including Babylon, Syria, and Asia Minor. Cyrus also conquered the northward land including Armenia and the Caspian Sea region, and southward including Egypt and Ethiopia under his son Cambyses. The goat is explained as the Greek Empire under the leadership of Alexander the Great, and after his death in 323 BC, there were 4 generals who were given divisions over 4 territories of Alexander's empire. In 338 BC, Philip II, king of Macedon, conquered the southern peninsula of Greece. Under Philip's son, Alexander the Great 336 to 323 BC, the Greek Empire was extended from Greece through Asia Minor to Egypt and the borders of India. Alexander's military conquests and his passion to spread Greek culture contributed to the advancement of Greek ideas throughout the ancient world. This adoption of Greek ideas by the rest of the ancient world was known as Hellenism. So thoroughly did Greek ideas penetrate the other nations that the Greek language became the dominant language of the known world. Greece is mentioned in the New Testament. Even in biblical times, Greece was a region of Greek city-states. The most important among them were Athens, Corinth, and Ephesus. Athens was the center of Greek art, literature, architecture, and learning. Athens was the dominant city-state from 499 to 478 BC, until its downfall in 404 BC. Corinth was the most important trade city, and Ephesus was a very great seaport of Asia Minor. The name of the country Greece occurs once in the New Testament, as opposed to Macedonia. Uproar occurred among the Ephesians on the account of Diana of the Ephesians. And after the uproar had ceased, Paul called the disciples to him, embraced them, and departed to go to Macedonia. Now when he had gone over that region and encouraged them with many words, he came to Greece and stayed 3 months. And when the Jews plotted against him as he was about to sail to Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia. Now the Greek religion was polytheistic and pagan. The inhabitants of Greece believed in a multitude of gods and goddesses that spread across and among the Greek city-states. The Greek religion was made up of myths, superstition, beliefs, and cults of many deities that were inherited, conquered, and communicated from other cultures. However, every city-state and village had claim to its own gods and heroes because they did not abandon their farmer gods. The Greeks simply embraced new gods and gave them ancient names. They believed that the gods descended and dwelt on Mount Olympus, the mountain of the gods, and was visited by them when they came to earth. They believed the gods walked among them. Similar, as our Creator came down to walk in the Garden of Eden, and many times thereafter through biblical history, and our Lord Jesus, our God Himself came down to earth, and He walked and dwelt among us, so the Greeks believed their gods came down to earth from Mount Olympus. The Greeks definitely had a spiritual blindness during the 5th century BC, at the height of their power. The inhabitants did nothing before they honored their gods. The treatment of the gods had important religious repercussion to the Greeks. They feared and had respect for the gods. They believed that they were to honor and worship the gods if they wanted to receive a blessing. They believed that if they pleased the gods by sacrificing animals to them, taking good care of them in giving them food, upkeeping, and decorating their sanctuaries, praying, and holding festivals to them, the people thought it would keep the gods happy. They believed if they angered the gods, that punishment would be inflicted upon them, for they believed the gods caused disasters as earthquakes, droughts, famine, and other catastrophes. They believed also that the gods were responsible for their defeat or conquest when they were at war. The gods and goddesses were present in their everyday lives. To worship the gods in an attempt to appease them, so that the inhabitants of Greece may have blessings instead of disasters, the Greek knowledge of the gods and their functions were important to them. The major gods and goddesses of Greece were many as well as their functions. Stories of the deities were passed down by myths and storytelling. The stories and characters of the gods had real-life applications and were collected and written down through generations. The stories of the gods helped to explain how the earth worked, and the Greeks sought to find meaning from the gods. They believed that each god had a function. For example, Zeus was the supreme god, the king of the gods who was known as the sky god who sent thunder and lightning, was to have resided over all the gods. He was the dispenser of good and evil, the giver of laws and fertility. One of his symbols is the thunderbolt he holds in his hand, and his principal shrines were in Athens and Olympia. Zeus was identified with the Latin god Jupiter, and today he is identified with the statue of the Apostle Peter in the Vatican. Poseidon was the Greek god of earthquakes, of the sea, and he is identified with the Roman god Neptune. Hermes was the messenger of the gods, and the Greek god of wealth, luck, sleep, commerce, science, and invention. He is identified with the Roman god Mercury. Apollo was a Greek god of the arts, and he was believed to have been a singer, a beautiful male, great athlete, strong perfect human. His principal sanctuary and oracle were at Delphi. His name is also Phoebus Apollo, the god of the sun. His statue today is erected in the Vatican Museum, that is, the Apollo Belvedere, 4th BC. Aphrodite was the goddess of sexuality, the goddess of love, fertility, and beauty, and she later became the Roman god, Venus. Artemis was the goddess of chastity and of hunting. She was said to help women in childbirth, and was identified with the Roman goddess Diana of the Ephesians. During the beginning of the Catholic Church, her name was changed to Mary. Athena was the presiding deity of Athens. She protected the city. She was a goddess of wisdom, arts, and handicrafts. She was later identified with the Roman god Minerva. The deities explained a difficult and random world to the Greeks. However, we cannot exclude the philosophies such as Stoicism and Epicureans, which were prominent in Athens. Greek religion included many gods. The religions of Egypt, Asia Minor, and Persia were more appealing than the old Greek gods because they promised immortality. However, the Greeks did not abandon their former gods, they simply adopted new gods and gave them old names. A renewed interest in astrology among the Greeks also led to widespread belief that the planets governed the lives and fates of human beings. The Greeks sought to control any turn of fate through worship. They even erected an altar inscribed to the unknown god, in their capital city of Athens. Greece had tremendous pride in human form that the Greek gods began to be attributed to the form of humans, with strength and power. They considered the gods to be endowed with bodies and passions closely resembling those of human beings. They began to worship men as gods or demigods. Alexander the Great was influenced by his flatterers that none but a god could have begotten him, and he claimed and received divine worship during his lifetime. Alexander the Great founded the city of Alexandria, in Egypt. He visited the temple of Zeus Ammon there, and there is where he declared himself a god. It soon became the custom in Asia and Egypt to treat kings and even governors as gods. They built numerous sculptures and temples to house them. One building was the Athenian Acropolis to commemorate their deities. Ptolemy II Theos was believed to have been a god to the Ptolemies. Antiochus IV of the Seleucids also considered himself a god. Temples and oracles were built in honor of Zeus, Apollo, and Athena. The city of Athens had more idols in its city than all the cities of Greece put together. It was a very important and influential city in spiritual things and in superstition. It had a city upon a hill called the Acropolis, which housed the Parthenon, where a temple dedicated to the patron goddess Athena resided. There was a sanctuary called the Erechtheum, dedicated also to Athena. There was an entrance called the Propylaiko. The Acropolis was located on the highest ground and built from white marble. The Parthenon was built around 447 BC. The Acropolis in Athens, the Greek city, was located on a hill about 500 feet high. It was adorned with magnificent architectural designs. It was a home of 4 buildings, the Propylaea, an entrance to a sacred enclosure, the Parthenon, the chief temple of Athena that originally held a great gold and ivory statue of Athena the goddess of war, and the Erechtheum, the temple of maidens. The Greeks also had a renewed interest in astrology among the Greeks, which also led to widespread belief that the planets and stars governed the lives and fates of human beings. The Greeks sought to control any turn of fate through the worship of the sun, the stars, and the planets. The Athenians were slaves to idols and led captive by these deities. Behind their every idol was the power of demons, and the people were led captive by Satan's will. If having many gods were not enough, they also took in all strange and new gods, giving them also temples and altars where idol worship and sacrifices could be given to them. Various gods and religious practices, which the Greek invaders found in the countries they conquered, were accepted into the Greek religion, and the result was more gods. The sky god Zeus retained a nominal role, but 7 or 8 other divinities held a position almost of equality. Magic and superstition were also practiced in the worship of these deities that surrounded the mythology of their system. The Greeks also had many interests in common, but the athletic contest, the Olympian Games, were held in honor of their gods. The purpose of the games was to worship the gods. The Olympian Games developed from Greece. The Greeks were interested in athletic competition, and the first Olympic Games were held in 776 BC. The games were held in the city Dionysian at Athens in honor of the Greek god Zeus, by the ancient Greeks, 776 BC to 394 AD. The Olympic Games were revived in 1896 AD, when 8 countries took part. Today many men and women from different countries participate in athletic summer competitions in sports such as track and field athletics, swimming, shooting, boxing, etc. It became an international amateur athletic competition festival called the Pan-Hellenic Festival, which was held every 4th year in the country the International Olympic Committee selected. Olympus is the ancient name of several mountains in Greece. It was the dwelling place of the gods in Greek mythology. There were 12 Olympian deities headed by Zeus. Olympia was the principal sanctuary of the Olympian gods, and the site of the ancient Olympic Games, in the mountainous peninsula, West Peloponnesus, Greece. Each god had its own statue, sanctuary, and stone temple. Their religious practices would also involve worshipping the patron god Athena of the city of Athens and Apollo of the city of Corinth. In New Testament times, Greek was the language spoken by the common people of the ancient world, as far west as Rome and the Rhone Valley, in southeastern France. Most of the New Testament was written originally in Greek. This precise and expressive language provided the most capable vehicle for expressing thought of any in the ancient world. Ancient Greece civilization developed around the coastland of the Mediterranean Sea. Greece is important to Christians because of its language. In the New Testament era, Greek was the language spoken by the common people of the ancient world. However, Jesus and his followers spoke in an Aramaic language, but most of the New Testament was originally written in Greek. The Christian institutions, as far west as Rome, were affected to a considerable extent by the language of ancient Greece. Greek language became the official language of the eastern half of the Roman Empire. Greek learning and culture eventually conquered the ancient Near East and continued as dominant forces throughout the New Testament era. Even after the rise of the Romans, about 146 BC, the influence of Greek language, culture, and philosophy remained strong, even influencing the Jewish religion. This particular language provided the expression of thought in the ancient world. There was no doubt that the influence of the Greek language was great, for during the whole of the Hellenistic Age, Balkan of the Peninsula, Asia Minor, Syria, Mesopotamia, and Egypt were methodically Hellenized in speech. Homer's epics formed the basis of the Olympian religion accepted throughout Greece. The principal gods were said to reside on Mount Olympus in northern Greece, and on its highest peak was the palace of Zeus, the chief deity. Each city retained local gods and rituals that had been transmitted through generations by folk memory and storytelling. When Christianity was introduced to the Grecian Jews, Greek religion faded out. Today Greeks have the Greek Orthodox faith. Continual internal warfare of the Greek city-states that dramatically weakened the peninsula of Greece, it soon fell to the Romans in 146 BC. The peninsula of Greece fell to the Romans and later became the senatorial province of Achaia with Corinth as its capital. The Apostle Paul visited this area on his second missionary journey, delivering his famous sermon to the Athenian philosophers. Later he appeared before the proconsul Gallio at Corinth. On his third missionary journey, he visited Greece for 3 months. Centuries later, when the Romans conquered the ancient world, they brought political organization to the Mediterranean. However, Rome did not change its Hellenistic culture for the very reason that Rome had become educated by the Greeks. The civilization, which Rome spread westward, was the later Greek way of life and thought, as modified by the Near Eastern fundamentals of the Hellenistic world. When the biblical writers use the term Greeks, therefore, they do not merely mean natives of Greece, they are speaking of all who have been influenced by Greek culture excluding the Jews. During the history of Alexander and his successors of the Hellenistic era, 323 to 70 BC, the Jews were constantly being tossed back and forth between the northern and the southern kingdoms of Greece. But there is a prophecy that promised the Jews that the Lord would save them. As for you also, because of the blood of your covenant, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to the stronghold, you prisoners of hope. Even today, I declare that I will restore double to you. For I have bent Judah, my bow, fitted the bow with Ephraim, and raised up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and made you like the sword of a mighty man. This prophecy was fulfilled during the conquests of the Maccabees against the Greco-Syrian Empire. Thank you for listening. If this video has been a blessing to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks.